We like to feature positive news, or news that isn't quite as depressing as news tends to be these days. So it seems right, and thank you. I think it was to Claire Monson at No Relation at Pure Portugal, who posted something up in the Pure Portugal Facebook group about. Let's go back to the screen share, shall we? And I'm going to find out about the plans to entice workers to the interior regions. Okay, so let me, I'll just spark up the screen share again. Exciting news on screen sharing and technology. I think I'll be having a kind of green screen vibe quite soon. So instead of this map that shows you the world, I'll be able to show you pictures of Portugal. I'll do a different. In fact, send your picture. Send a picture that you would like projected behind me, and I'll put it on during the show. How about that? You're part of Portugal. You know, like they do on the news sometimes, how they feature people's weather. On the weather, they feature people's localities. And here's a picture from Derek Jones in Wittering, West Wittering, and a lovely scene there of the ducks on the lake. And that's what I'll do. Send me any kind of picture that features Portugal in its finest. And if there's any nudity, do it in a tasteful way. Okay, if you're one of those nudist beach fans or whatever, just make sure it's tasteful. And we'll put it on behind here instead of the world. We'll zoom in on a particular part of Portugal, showing it in all its glory. So let me just share this screen with you that's about the plans to entice workers to the interior regions. Quite a good way of staying in touch with Portugal, particularly the Algarve area. That will be the Portugal News, Portugal's national newspaper in English. And this lady here, whose name, Ana Abrunhosa. She's talking at a parliamentary hearing about tax breaks and support for workers who move to the interior regions, along with reduced road tolls, are all hoped to attract people to less densely populated areas of the country. Excellent news, in my view. As in with all sort of neoliberal capitalist economies around the world, urbanization and the countryside being deserted are features of modern life. And the great thing to me about Portugal is that if we come to our senses and realize that it's probably not such a brilliant idea for everybody to head to the big cities or the coast, because that's also what happens, I think, here in Portugal. People tend to migrate to the coast. It's a real kind of human evolution thing, isn't it? The attraction of the coast for human beings. But Porto, Lisbon, and the coast are where people go. You know, it feels, I suppose, to people like they're dying a slow death when they compare their life in the countryside to what's possible. And this is what human beings have always done, right? Migrated for better opportunities. And it's so strange, I think, to a lot of people now to think that you could go and earn more in the cities and experience a better quality of life, but a higher cost of living. Or you could stay put and sort of slowly starve to death in the countryside. Or here's the thing, here's the missing link in all of that, is that if the differentials of income and the cost of living and investments in local infrastructure were just a tiny bit different, if there was an honouring of how great it was to live in the countryside, I don't think it would take a massive amount of investment. But it's like, you know, where are politicians, generally speaking? They're in the big places, aren't they? Their life isn't in the countryside, perhaps only at the weekend. And, you know, they can afford to drive there and have their house there and so on. And I suppose their recognition, this isn't Portugal necessarily, this is everywhere, you know, their recognition of country life is something that people may want to move away from and not be invested in. And for all sorts of reasons, might it not be a good idea for people to stay in the countryside and have a low impact way of life in the countryside that is arguably so much better for their individual quality of life and for their children's quality of life, and create life on a smaller scale? So not necessarily, you know, these tiny subsistence villages, because that's a really hard economic formula to work out, but like the bigger villages where you can have a hospital, or a number of villages that share a hospital, and schools and infrastructure and stuff like that. Not unlike the suburban model, but instead of like building lots of houses in a kind of abstract way, build them in a more natural way. So it looks like a village rather than a suburb of a city that's just a dormitory for people going to and from the city. We can work at home now, can't we? People want to grow vegetables. People want to live in smaller communities. all of that adds up to like, hey, hold on a minute. Isn't this how we used to live decades ago in smaller villages? And the beautiful thing, this is the long arc of where I'm coming back to with what I'm trying to say here, is Portugal is still set up for that. There are deserted villages. You can buy entire villages that have been deserted, but there are small places that still have some life in them. They've still got their cafe. They've still got some sort of economy. You see a mechanic's workshop. You see a furniture shop. You see the strangest shops, independent shops still. People just hanging on in there in the smaller towns and the bigger villages. And all they need is a little bit more in terms of infrastructure and the ratio of, the cost of living to, just to help them get the margins a bit bigger and to keep the people there using the services rather than drifting slowly away to the place where this mug comes from, to the Lidls of the world. And, I'm not anti-supermarket necessarily, but I'm not for how they disrupt and kill life on a local level. So, yes, that's a rant, isn't it? That's not very much Portuguese positive news, but I'm just trying to point towards a more positive way of life. Tax breaks and support for workers who move to the interior regions, along with reduced road tolls, are all hoped to attract people to less densely populated areas of the country. And you have to commend the government for looking at that. And that is the 31st of January news story from the Portugal News. Let's read a bit more. The new Working in the Interior programme will have local and regional networks to provide financial support to workers, as well as promote training and retraining courses, said the Minister for Territorial Cooperation. In a parliamentary hearing, Ana Abrunhosa said that the new programme aims to ensure that the interior is able to attract and retain more people. So, yes, well done. Lovely move. With this programme, the government will create local and regional support networks to provide financial support to workers. I don't know exactly what that would mean, if that's a tax break or a subsidy into the wages or whatever. Maybe now's the time to look at universal basic income and prioritise people who live in these very areas. With this programme, the government will create local and regional support networks to provide financial support to workers to share costs associated with their travel. That's the killer, isn't it? If you've got to drive to work in the interior, that starts to add up every day. Excuse me, I'm just going to cough. Yeah, that's better. To guarantee more speedy access to the labour market and to promote incentives from interior councils to companies and families, she said. Sounds like there's still a little bit of the vibe of, working for another company. They could also be encouraging people to work from home and start businesses, online, or to equip people to work for other companies, but from home. As teleworkers. That could work, couldn't it? In addition, working in the interior will promote training and retraining initiatives for workers, as well as encourage their involvement in identifying training needs. Fantastic. We propose that small and medium enterprises, the SMEs in the interior, benefit from a special corporate income tax rate of 12.5% for the first 25,000 of taxable income. This is marvellous. It's also reflected actually in the new golden visa legislation or offer. The amount you need to spend is now down. You have to spend €500,000 in the big cities to qualify for a golden visa ticket, basically, so you get residency as part of investing in the country. I believe that's now down to something like, and I will find this out more accurately, but I think it's €350,000 if you buy it in the interior. So there is thinking about how we get people in the interior and enjoying the interior of this incredible country. In addition to the tax benefit, the proposal of the State Budget 2020 suggests a 20% corporate income tax deduction on expenses on job creation, with the intention of creating qualified employment in the interior. You'll notice here that a lot of this involves paperwork. And I think it's really important to do things that kind of just sort of set people free, really. But I suppose, governments will always do that to some extent. They need to measure things, don't they? They need to be part of the action, so they're not just going to help and not want to be in the action there somewhere. But you've got to make it easy for people, haven't you? Abrunhosa also added that the road toll discounts are available for those who live, work and visit interior regions at the weekend. So that is a little bit of a bone of contention, I think, for local people who know how to avoid the toll roads. That if you made them affordable, people would use them. If you don't make them affordable, people just drive on the bit that's free, drive off again and use the back road. And I'm sure you could write a book of all the best back roads to get you from A to B without ever having to use a toll road. Local people know how to do that. We're working on toll discounts for the interior based on quantity of discounts. Without detailing the percentage discounts or headlines, the minister explained that the proposal to reduce tolls in inland regions is under study. There were a working group made up of members of the Ministries of Territorial Cooperation, Infrastructure and Housing. That sounds like a dry old meeting, doesn't it? And Finance, which is working on various scenarios for the gradual reduction of tolls. Yes, who wouldn't be? Well, I was going to say who wouldn't be up for the reduction of tolls, but the people who make the money up wouldn't be up for that. But maybe, arguably there's a lot of capacity on those roads. You'd still make the same amount of money if you let people make more trips that were cheaper, if you see what I mean. Get people using those roads. That's what they were built for. But they're too expensive. People don't like using them. We will guarantee a simpler and clearer regime with lower costs for those living in the interior and for those who visit, guaranteeing greater use of infrastructures already built and a reduction in road accidents. Ana Abrunhosa explained that this measure should be implemented as soon as possible. Awesome. If you want to comment directly at the Portugal News, go to portugalnews.com and check out that story. I'll put the link for that with the podcast section that relates to me sharing that with you. This is the Good Morning Portugal radio show. It's already 25 minutes past 9 o'clock. I can't believe that.